What's up everyone, today we're breaking down the mechanized units in squad. This can be a pretty fun unit to use and it's pretty popular across the map voting. So let's take a deeper dive into the mechanized unit, but first be sure to hit the subscribe button, leave a like, and drop a comment down below if you've used the mechanized unit and what are your thoughts. As expected, the mechanized unit is going to lean heavily on APCs and IFVs to make up a lot of its vehicles. In fact, some factions will even rely on tracked logistics vehicles. The point is that most of your infantry will be leaning on those APCs and IFVs for transportation across the map, giving them a protected vehicle to be within along with some extra firepower if utilized in sort of a mechanized infantry format. And that mechanized infantry is really where you're going to see this unit thrive. This could be as simple as utilizing IFVs very closely with infantry pushes onto objectives. If your armored vehicles are playing a part from infantry, this could actually be an issue for this unit over the long term of a match. Whereas if the IFVs are able to keep some of the infantry resupplied, perhaps off of rallies, they can position pretty quickly, provide suppression, and really move infantry into some crazy positions to attack whatever the enemy's got coming at you. Now there is one slight weakness with some of these units. Depending on the faction, your IFV may not have ATGMs. And all of these units are only going to get one main battle tank on a 10-minute respawn timer. So if you don't have an ATGM on your IFV and you only have one main battle tank, the one area you might have a tough time against is if the enemy team picks some sort of armored unit that is going to run at you with multiple tanks or tank destroyers. Which is again why mechanized infantry could be really helpful with this unit, because then you can have hats and or lats near your IFVs to help slow down those tanks and start disrupting their ability to push forward until your tank in the field or some sort of ATGM is operational near a fob. Now, of course, with that extra protection and the additional firepower, there are some trade-offs. For example, minimal to no light vehicles across the factions. Now, you may have wheeled IFVs instead of tracked IFVs, which will be a little bit helpful in terms of speed, but a lot of the factions are only going to operate tracked IFVs, which is going to slow you down and decrease mobility across maps. But factions where you're leaning on wheeled IFVs are typically going to lack vehicle-mounted ATGMs. Whereas many, not all, tracked IFVs will actually have an ATGM, giving a little bit more power to those vehicles. So as always, when picking your unit, you need to be aware of what the map selection is and how that unit is going to work on that map. I think this unit is going to lend itself to a lot of the popular maps in squad, everything from Yehirivka to Gorodok to Manikugan. Maps where the elevation change isn't too wild and you're going to have cover between trees or urban areas that your IFVs can utilize for cover. Now, depending on the faction, whether you have wheeled IFVs or tracked IFVs, I could see these being popular choices for something more dense and urban like Fallujah or Narva. But I'd lean into factions with wheeled IFVs instead of tracked on those maps. And the same is going to go for maps where the terrain might get a little bit wild. So if there are tracked IFVs on the unit we're looking at, I'm probably going to hesitate to select them for Lashkar Valley or Scorpo. So you may need to weigh what faction the unit is a part of and part of your map voting process, checking to see if you're reliant on primarily wheeled vehicles or tracked vehicles. Now, in some of the videos I've been doing breaking down units, I've been talking about how to utilize them effectively on a map. But I do think the best way to use the mechanized unit is via mechanized infantry. So let's talk about what that looks like. Now, typically I'm going to lean on wheeled IFVs just because they'll have a little bit more speed and maneuverability in certain areas. But of course you can use tracked vehicles, either an IFV or an APC. Now, it's pretty common for the IFV just to have two people operating, and if it's a decent commander seat, it doesn't always hurt if you can afford it to have a third person in that Vic. But I'm typically going to keep the IFV squad separate from the infantry squad, just so that there's a little bit more communication and control over what each unit is doing separately. What's beneficial is that these vehicles can typically hold 8 or 9 passengers, so you can get your whole infantry squad in there and just roam. But the more important aspect of all of this is utilizing positioning with these two entities combined. So you can lean on something like the wheeled IFV to position the infantry not directly in harm's way, but use it to wrap around the enemy. Find good positioning for your infantry to move in behind the enemy, disrupt their ability to make that objective sustainable for them to hold, and then you can try to capture the point, all while the IFV is able to provide fire support. Now, ideally, this sort of unit is going to be really effective at taking down enemy radios, again, making their position unsustainable and hopefully allowing the rest of the team to move in to capture objectives. But now let's shift our focus to what faction has the mechanized unit type. It's important to remember that every faction has access to boats, which is solely dependent on the map. Now, as far as emplacements go, it's pretty standard across every faction. Just keep in mind that insurgents have the ability to buddy rally. They can also place 2 habs down for every fob at a discounted rate. The IMF also gets discounted habs. Starting with the Bluefor factions, we have the 1st Battalion Royal Australian Regiment. They'll come complete with up to 3 transports, 2 full-size Logis, 2 PMVs, and 4 ASLAVs. They'll also have an M1A1 Abrams and 1 helicopter. Next, we have the British Armed Forces York's Battle Group. They'll have up to 3 transports, 2 full-size Logis, and an assortment of tracked vehicles, including 2 Bulldogs, 2 FV-107 Scimitars, and 3 Warriors, 2 of which will be up-armored. They'll also have 1 Challenger and 1 helicopter. Next, we have the Canadians with their 1st Battalion Royal Regiment. They'll have up to 3 transports, 2 full-size Logis, 2 TAP BC-6s, and 3 LAV-6s, along with 1 Leopard and 1 helicopter. Now, at the time of making this video, these are the 3 Bluefor factions that currently have mechanized units. But it's important to note, like I mentioned earlier, that none of these Bluefor IFVs have ATGMs mounted on them. Onto the independent factions, you have the IMF's Irregular Mechanized Platoon. They'll have up to 3 transports, 2 full-size Logis, 1 armored Logi, 2 MTLB tracked Logis, 2 MTLB 6MBs, 1 BMP-1, 2 BMP-2s, 2 MTLB Zu-23 anti-air, and then 1 BM-21 Grad. They'll of course have 1 T-62 and no helicopters. Next, we have the Insurgents Irregular Mechanized Platoon. They'll have up to 3 transports, 3 full-size Logis, 2 MTLB tracked Logis, 1 MTLB PKT, 3 BMP-1s, and 2 MTLB Zu-23 anti-air gun, along with 1 T-62. The Middle Eastern Alliance operates the 3rd King Qadesh Mechanized Infantry Brigade. They'll have up to 3 transports, 3 tracked MTLB Logis, 2 MTLB 6MAs, 2 BMP-1s, and 2 BMP-2s. They'll also get 1 T-72S and 1 helicopter. The Turkish Land Forces operate the 66th Mechanized Infantry Brigade Battle Group. They'll come complete with up to 3 transports, 2 full-size Logis, and a bunch of ACVs, including 2 MG3 ACVs, 2 M2 ACVs, and 4 IFV ACVs, which has a primary gun of a 25mm Bushmaster. They'll also get 1 M60T main battle tank and 1 helicopter. Next up is the PAC Alliance, and first, the PLA's ground forces has the 4th Medium Combined Arms Battalion. They're going to operate up to 3 armed transports, 3 ZSD-05 tracked logistics vehicles, 2 ZSD-05s, 2 ZBDs, and 1 ZTD tank destroyer, along with 1 ZTZ main battle tank and 1 helicopter. Now, for the PLA Marine Corps, it does list the 3rd Marine Heavy Battalion, but that is actually their armored group, so I think this is just a typo. But within the Red 4 group, you do have the VDV's 108th Guards Air Assault Regiment. They'll have up to 3 transports, 3 tracked BTR DG Logis, 1 BTR D Cord, 1 BTR ZD, 1 BTR MDM, and 3 BMD-4s. And of course, they'll get a T-72 and a helicopter. Now, looking back, the Turkish Land Forces obviously aren't going to have any vehicles with ATGMs. The IMF and Insurgents will only have ATGMs when they have a BMP-1. The MEA will also get BMP-2s with an ATGM. And of course, you have the PLA ZBD, which will have an ATGM, along with the BMD-4 from the VDV, which have ATGMs. But hopefully this gives you a pretty good understanding of the mechanized units and what they're capable of. I'll probably go more in depth in a separate video on mechanized infantry. It's been something on my list to do for a while. But now with how the units are set up, I think it's even more important to get some education out there on how you can try to utilize that setup in your rounds. Now, we have a whole playlist of the videos breaking down all the different unit types, so be sure to check that out. If you like the video, hit the like button. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Leave a comment down below with what unit you prefer to use. And with that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.